Welcome to my show. A guest here. His name is Dr. Brenton White. Mr. Dr. Brenton, how are you doing, sir?
I am doing great. How are
All
you?
right. I'm fine. Thank you very much, Dr. Brenton. Firstly, you are a doctor of education. You also have a lot of experience when it comes to the education aspect. Can you please, Dr. Brenton, discuss more about yourself and how you are doing currently now, Dr. Brenton?
Well, thank you. I am currently a superintendent of a charter school, A plus charter schools in Southeast Dallas. We serve 2,800 students. We are predominantly low income, and that's the reason why we're here. I believe it's about 98% free or reduced. And we serve a majority minority population. So there's about 90, I'm going to say it's last time I looked, it's about 95% um, Hispanic, African American. And then the other is everything else. Um, and so we're here to make a difference in this area. There's a lot of poverty in this area. And so I do this because I grew up in a neighborhood just like this, and I experienced poverty as a child. And I think
Hmm.
that education is a great way to change that. It's the great equalizer. If I give an education to a person who is in poverty, then what's going to happen is then they have the opportunity to change their future for their kids.
Completely agree. Poverty is a very, very ill thing happening today in our world, Dr. Brenton. And I would like to dive to the point of books, Dr. Brenton. If you've written any books, Dr. Brenton, and can you also speak on the A plus charter schools, which you also discussed a little bit about, Mr. Dr. Brenton?
Um, I wrote a book for my dissertation, which is it's about how superintendent paths are affected, or how. Let me go back. It's um, how charter school superintendents and their preparation paths affect student outcomes, and it's very interesting. It's you can find it at ProQuest. I'm also in the currently writing a couple books. They're not coming out yet. They should be out this summer. One is on leadership, and another one is just just some basic. Well, they're both on leadership, but one is basically my approach to leadership.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brenton. And I would like to dive to the point of education. When we talk about education, we would like to also know if it's also play a huge role when it comes to the area of poverty today. I remember you said education, for someone to be educated, it also pulls someone out in the point of poverty. I would like to ask Dr. Brenton, how do you think education play a crucial role in breaking the cycle of poverty, Dr. Brenton?
So poverty is usually something people are born into, and they usually don't have any kind of way to get out of it. You can't, I can't talk to a parent and say, "Hey, I'm going to help you make more money." But what I can do is give a good education. So, if a student is born into poverty and then they get a good education, now that may not be like a it may be a college, it may be like a career. The training and education may be college, it may be career, but you have to have some kind of skill, and basically education just cultivates that skill. So you have a skill, and the skill, the more you add to it, the more you put in your toolbox. And so what happens is, if you take a person and they get out of high school, they can get only a certain number of jobs. But you add additional training and education to that, and it makes it to where they have more opportunities. So the more education they have, the more opportunities they have. And so as a doctor, there are some jobs that I can get that people without a doctorate cannot. Um, I get requests to apply for presidents of colleges, okay, when they're looking for a search firm. Well, you have to be a doctor to run a college. And so that's how education changes. Now, not everybody's going to get a doctorate. I understand that. But I think people need to get as much education as they can, and they also need to continue to learn. The moment you stop learning, you will, they say that in about a year and a half, you'll be out of a job if you stop learning and you stop growing. So
Exactly.
education is very important.
I completely agree with you, Dr. Bryson. Education is crucial. It is very, very, very important. You also remind me of a time, I felt like education is not really that valuable because, when someone go on the internet, you hear the information saying, without education, you can do this, without education, you can do that. But we also have to continue to remember that education plays a very huge role, even in the community we are. If one is educated, it definitely helps. And I would like to also ask, dive to the point of the biggest barriers to education. What do you think are the biggest barriers, to education that low income communities face today, Dr. Brenton?
Well, some of it is paying for the education.
Mm-hmm.
One of the biggest barriers we see is a fixed mindset. So we'll have a student who gets an opportunity to go to college and maybe even a scholarship, but the parent says, "Well, if you stay here, you can make money now. You make X amount of money." And what we try to explain to them is, if you allow them to go to college, 4 years from now, they'll be ahead of where they were if they just started working. And so that's one of the barriers that we deal with. We also deal with the idea that we only know what we know, right? And so when you talk to a parent who didn't go to college and you say, "Hey, your kid's going to go to college," they don't understand what that is and what the benefit to that is going to be. Um, I use myself, for example. My mom went to college when I was a kid, and I watched her go and get her bachelor's degree and then her master's degree. So when I started going to college, my mom had a reference point to talk to me about it. And so that allowed me to learn from her experience. But in poverty, you usually don't have people with degrees, right? Because well, you when you have that degree, those opportunities allow you to get out of poverty, right? So, but when we're talking to a parent, one of the biggest barriers is they don't understand it and they think money now, not money later. Does that make sense?
That definitely makes sense, Dr. Brenton. I completely agree with you. And I would also like to also dive to the point of schools. No matter how this poverty is, will also need to play a very huge role, assisting the student today. I would like to ask what schools can also do to support student, Dr. Brenton, in dealing with hunger, housing instability, and even other hardship, Dr. Brenton.
Okay, well, schools need to understand that while you're giving a student education, you're not changing their current situation. You're changing their situation in the future. So, um, for instance, we have a clinic in our school, and we have that for the convenience. So, if a kid comes to school and they're sick, they're not thinking about education, they're thinking about their sickness. And so that clinic allows them to go down there, figure out what's wrong, fix the problem so they can get back to learning. We also have a food pantry, meaning that kids can go and shop for food, because when they're at school, we feed them. But when they leave our schools, the problem is I don't know what their parents have. I don't know if there's food at home. I don't know anything. I do know in this neighborhood, there's a problem. This is a food desert. So we have limited grocery stores. So what we do is we provide food for the student and the family, um, while they're getting an education. So I think what happens is schools in poverty areas have to make sure they're not just educating, they're supporting the kid, because if you come to school hungry, what are you thinking about?
Mm.
Not what the teacher is talking about. You're thinking about, I need to get something to eat. And then sometimes, kids might resort to stealing food or whatnot to get by. Hate to think of that, but think about that. What is that kid? The kid is, you know, it's the hierarchy of needs, right? He's trying to solve that problem. And If a kid is hungry all day, they're not going to learn. We did have early in our when we started school, we've been open 27 years. We had a kid who came back from Thanksgiving and passed out. And what we found out is the last time that they had eaten was at our school. So they went home for 5 days
Wow.
and they passed out when they came back because they hadn't eaten, they were late and didn't get breakfast. So you have to know that the kids have these needs and you have to really take care of these needs. What I call it, I say we're going to remove every barrier to learning we can. And that may be that they're homeless and they need extra support, or they need a bus pass to get to school, or they need, whatever. That's what the school has to do to help students in poverty. There are schools that have very few kids in poverty. They have different problems, right? There's no school without problems. But people in poverty need to understand they also have to have more of an empathy, not sympathy, empathy. You have to understand what it's like, and you just can't write off the kid because the kid's late. You may ask them why, and it may be they're working. So you have to be aware of what it's like. Um, Ruby Payne has a book, or she has multiple books, but there's books. Her main books are on poverty and understanding that mindset. And once you understand that mindset, then you know how to address the problem and treat the kids the way they should be treated.
I completely agree with you, Mr. Dr. Brenton. It's definitely not easy. This, it's not, it's the truth. It's just the truth. When a child hasn't eaten, there is no way the child will learn. And that's why some teachers just have to start to analyze some kids. Some kids might not get what he or she is, trying to pass on, but it might be because he or she hasn't eaten. It is not easy. And I also like to go to the point of adults. There are a lot of children who has grew, due to the result of poverty. They were unable to have this education they expect to have for themselves. So they've grew to a point where they are mature and they would like to go back to school to study, to try their best to get educated in the community they find themselves. How do you think they can go about it, without accumulating debt, Dr. Brenton?
Yeah, if adults actually, well, if they don't have their high school diploma, there's a lot of free programs, GED programs. There's training programs. Down the street, we have a place called Inspired Vision Compassion Center, and they do job training, absolutely free. So there's all these resources. The problem is most people don't know about it. And so what you need to do is if you're in a community and you want to learn, go talk to the Chamber of Commerce. There's a lot of free, talk to the schools. A lot of the K-12 schools understand where you can get additional training. And then if it's college, I went to some really nice colleges, but there's nothing wrong with a junior college. They're very cheap, and you get a very good return on your investment. So you can go to junior college, take 2 years of classes for a lot less than say some big, the University of Texas. That's going to cost you a lot of money, but you could go down to Dallas College, which is a community college, and they will you're paying a fraction of the price for credit. The other thing is this: there's always these internships where they're free or at a very reduced rate. You know, the Department of Labor does a lot of free training, and it's out there, and it's especially for people who qualify as in poverty. So I would say this: if you're in poverty and um, you're not getting the training you need. You're not asking the right people. You're not going to the right place. Um, some people, unfortunately, want to stay in poverty. Most people do not because it's painful to be in poverty. And so I would say, go to your K-12, go to your community college, ask them how can I get more? And it really, if you don't ask, you can't get it. Go to your local high school. They're going to tell you because what happens is when you're graduating kids, sometimes kids don't graduate. And so you got to help them. So if somebody came to me, I would say, here's all the opportunities. Now, I may not do all those opportunities. I may not run a GED program or an ESL program for parents, but I know where they can get one. And so reach out to your community leaders and your schools and ask them what's available and then take advantage of that. A lot of people, you know, yeah, there's a funny story where this guy, you know, we're having flooding here in Dallas, and so there's a guy, and he the water starts rising, and he prays, God, send me, help me, save me, right? And there's a boat that comes by, and he goes, no, I'm waiting for God to come save me, right? And so then he gets on the top of his house because it's starting to rise, and another boat comes by, and he says, hey, the guy in the boat says, hey, come out, let me help you. And he goes, no, I'm waiting for God. And finally he gets to the very top, and a helicopter comes by, and he goes, no, helicopter guy says, come on, you're going to drown. And the guy says, no, I'm waiting for God. And then he drowns, and he goes to heaven, and God, he said, what happened? He said, you know, God, why didn't you save me? And he said, hey, I sent you two boats and a helicopter. What more do you need? And so a lot of times people don't take advantage of what's there. And so I say, take advantage of what's there. It may not be the perfect thing, but it will lead you to the next thing. I mean, I didn't start out to become a superintendent. I just started to be a teacher. And as a teacher, then I became a principal. And so it kind of morphed along that pathway. And so, you know, you take the next step. You don't have to know the whole journey because you'll never know the whole journey. But you take that next step and take the opportunity and take advantage of what's there.
Yeah, I completely agree, Dr. Brenton. We have to just continue to pick on those opportunities. Those opportunities is what we need. And as you said, seeking the right people, for advice and discussion. Opportunities are everywhere. We do not just know where those opportunities are. Thank you so much, Dr. Brenton. And lastly, you will definitely have success stories from your experience since you've become a principal and someone who has upgraded when it comes to the education aspect, Dr. Brenton. If you have any, can you please, Dr. Brenton, share with us a success story of someone who you felt overcame poverty through education, Dr. Brenton?
Well, I know many stories. I'll share a couple.
Okay.
One is me. I'm doing a presentation this afternoon, and I was looking at in my K-12 experience. I attended 7 different schools, and I moved 13 times in 13 years. Okay. I lived in hotels because I was technically homeless. I lived in a couple different hotels. Um, my family qualified for free and reduced, but we didn't take it because my mom said, we're just kind of passing through this. Okay. So I was born into poverty, but here's the deal. When I started working, 27 years ago, I started, as a teacher, I was making money where I didn't qualify for free and reduced lunches. Although I did as a child, I don't. And now I definitely don't. I mean, as a doctor, I have these opportunities as a superintendent. My son goes to my school. He doesn't qualify. I mean, he's nowhere near. They always laugh. I fill out the form and they're like, why do you do this? I said, because you asked. They said, you need like 60 or 80 kids to qualify. I'm like, I know, I only got three. And that's not, I don't need more kids. But um, I am an example to others that you can start out in poverty. You just don't have to stay there. I live in the nicest house that I've ever lived in. I drive the nicest cars that I ever did. My family as a whole is successful. I have two sisters that are doctors, and my brother uh, has done all but his dissertation on his doctorate. Right, so there's four of us, and we're all doctors or DB, you know, all but dissertation, ABD, and so none of us are living in poverty. All of us can take care of our things. In fact, we're helping other people. And so I will say I had one kid. And I'll just say I won't use his name, but he's a great kid. When he came to me, his family was living in poverty. Um, he was in trouble all the time. I worked with him, helped him understand that his goal in life was to become 16 and drop out of high school.
Mm.
And I didn't think that was a good idea because I knew that he would have problems. And I thought he might be in trouble with the law or something, you know. Um, and so I worked with him. Took me about 3 years. He was in trouble every day. He went from being in trouble every day to never being in trouble in 3 years, right? And so what's happened is he got out of high school and he went to the technical college and became a truck driver. And then he went back and became a diesel mechanic. And so about 3 months ago, I was driving down the highway and I stopped at a store. And when I came out, he was there, and he looked at me and he goes, "Dr. White, is that you?" And I was like, "Oh my goodness!" And I said his name, and we hugged, and he was sitting on it. He had a Can-Am Spider, like one of those three-wheeled motorcycles, and I was talking to him, and he said, "Hey, would you like my toy?" And I said, "Isn't it great that we can grow up and then we have these options?" He goes, "Oh, yeah, I got a couple of these, and I got this, and I got that." And I said, "Isn't it wonderful that he's like 40 years old now. Isn't it wonderful that you have a house, you have cars, you have trucks, you have this, you have that." And he said, "Yeah." And he said, "Also, in my truck driving, I just tell them, yeah, I don't want to do that anymore." He said, "I only do heavy haul. That pays the best." He says, "I have options." And that's the coolest part. This young man, love him to death. He's a great kid. I kind of feel like he's my son because I feel like I raised him. He's not in poverty, but he was there, and he changed his life. Now, technical college, yes. Does he have a degree like a master's or doctorate? No, but he's a productive citizen. He's paying his taxes.
Wow.
He doesn't live in a bad neighborhood. He lives in a good neighborhood. He has all these things that is afforded to him because he went and got more education. And so I'm very proud of him. And what's amazing is we instilled the love for learning in him. And so the day I got my doctorate, the next day he called me in the morning and he said, "Hey, I hear you're a doctor." And I said, "Yeah." And you know what he said? He said, "I'm proud of you." And that meant more to me. I mean, it makes me tear up. Sorry. It makes me tear up because that meant more to me than anything, because here's a kid that wasn't into education. We taught him the importance of education. He went on to get an education. And when I got my doctorate, which I got in 2019, he called me to congratulate me and told me how important it was for me to set that example for him. And so that's a kid. There's so many others. I mean, I sat on the Southeast Dallas Chamber of Commerce, and last year the chair of the chamber, who was also an attorney, was one of our former students. Her life is totally different. She ran for public office. In fact, she ran for justice of the peace in my neighborhood. She would have been my justice of the peace, right? So we went from us training her and teaching her to her being over us, right? And so there's a ton. Basically what we do is we ask the kid, "What do you want to do?" And then we help them get there. And education is a huge part of that. I mean, the opportunities that are afforded to people are amazing when they get a great education. And it doesn't matter the subject. You just study something you love and that you want to do. It's the 80-20 principle. You got to do 80% of the time, you got to do a job that you love. 20% of the time, you don't have to love it, but you'll do it to get back to the 80%. So if people will figure out what they want to do, what do they love 80% of the time, go study that, they'll be successful.
Completely agree. And I am so happy for your son, Dr. Brenton, for giving you this sincere appreciation. I'm so happy for him that he's also living so happily and well today. That defines every single reason we need education in our life. It is very important for us to get to the higher place we need, for us to not be rejected on what we absolutely deserve. Education is needed. Thank you so much, Dr. Brenton. I normally ask a question during the end of the show, Dr. Brenton, from our forefathers, from our fathers who have passed on during the historic time. There are a lot of things that do exist during that time, but a lot of it are missing in our time today. If there is anyone or anything you would probably like to bring back to our time today, Dr. Brenton? What do you think that thing will be, Dr. Brenton?
When I think about it, I think of grit, grit, just stick to itness. Angela Duckworth wrote a book on grit, and I was listening to another book that was referring to that today by John Gordon. But grit, back in the day, people did stuff. It took longer. When you wanted to cross the United States, it took months. Now you can do it in a couple hours. Um, I think what that's done to us is we don't have the resiliency that grit gave us. And so, you know, you don't become a doctor overnight. You don't become a success overnight. They normally say a success is a 10,000 hours of working on something, right? 10,000 hours. They say if you want to be an expert, you have to read 50 books on a topic. That doesn't happen overnight. And the problem though is people pick up their first book and they go, okay, well, here's my first book. And then they get a few pages into it and then they say, I'm tired. But the only way you're going to get to book 50 is to read book one, right? I wrote my dissertation is 226 pages, long dissertation, very, if you want to go check it out, it's a lot of research, right? People said, how did you write it? Did you write it one chapter at a time? I said, no, I didn't write it one chapter at a time. Like, well, what about one page at a time? I said, no, I didn't write it one page at a time. They're like, well, what a paragraph? Nope. Sentence? Nope. I said, I wrote one word at a time. I wrote another word, and then that became a sentence. And then I wrote three sentences equal a paragraph, and so many paragraphs, it's one word at a time. It's one book at a time. It's that. And I think people they quit before they're successful. I don't know. Somebody told me the other day, most people quit before they get their breakthrough, right? I wish that we had more grit. I wish people understood that if you work hard, you keep at it, you will be successful. And so, yeah, I wrote 226 pages. Actually, so I'm a geek. It's 50,600 words. Okay. One word at a time, one word at a time,
At a
one
time.
chapter at a time. And so when I put that together, it took me, I'm going to say about 10 months to do that. Right. And people say, what did you do during that 10 months? I worked and I wrote. And that's important. I did something every day on the dissertation, every day. And I had it line it out. I said, the hardest thing for me to do is write. I try to write every day. If I don't write, what's the next easiest thing? Well, the next easiest thing to do is read. Okay. So that's so if I couldn't write, I would read. And then if I couldn't read, I'd do research. I'd find articles. Okay. But every day I started with the most difficult. If I couldn't do that, I did the next least difficult. And then I did the easiest, right? But I always tried that. That way I did something every day. They said if you can't run, you walk. And if you can't walk, then you crawl. But you have to keep moving. And I think that's what our society misses, that people don't keep moving. And if you want to be a success, you have to keep moving.
Mhm.
You know, like after this, I got to go do more stuff. I just can't say, hey, I've done this podcast. My day is over. No, my day is just beginning. Okay. My day will end. I have two presentations, the podcast. My day will end about 7:30 tonight. It started at 5 a.m. this morning. And guess what? I'll do it all again tomorrow. And you know what? You're repetitive. You keep moving, you keep moving, you keep moving. You find success, but success doesn't just appear overnight. It's a journey, not a destination. And so, grit, having grit. I wish we had more grit because I see people who have great opportunities and they just don't do it because they don't have that stick to itiveness.
That is definitely the main reason why patience is very important. We have to continue
Yes.
to work more harder and have this sense of patience. It cannot just blow up instantly or overnight. It is going to take time. It takes gradual process is how it goes in the life we find ourselves today. Nothing happens overnight. Nothing. I want to also sincerely thank you, Dr. Brenton, for this opportunity, for this time on overcoming poverty. A lot of people are really, a lot of things are happening. We can't just even say a lot. If we want to start to say it, we could use the whole day. And I want to also thank you for the time and the opportunity you've given me and the listeners today. Thank you so much, Dr. Brenton.
Yeah, thank you so much. I appreciate you.
All right, sir. Have a wonderful day with Dr. Brenton. Bye bye.
Okay, bye.